Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. So glad you could be with me here today in the workshop. Walter here. Well, I had to hire myself a pigtailed apprentice. By pigtailed apprentice, we mean it has this electronic pigtail, this umbilical cord that sends electrons to the motor. First up, I want to shout out to Peter. Thank you so much for lending me this. It's going to help me uniform my lumber, get it all dimensioned so I can stack it tighter and get it to dry more evenly. Thicknessing planer. Don't call this just a planer. And then there's that other machine that's called a jointer. That's true. It joints, it flattens one face. This is a thicknesser, a thickness planer. Okay, I want to get that right out of the way. So, over the years, I've probably run 1,000,000 feet through power machines. Jointers, planers, sanders, power saws, everything. So, I'm no novice to these machines. And I will tell you, there's a few things that you want to remember. First and foremost, no, I'm not going to talk safety, all right? That's your responsibility. You have to know your tools, how to use them, how to care for them, and how to take care of, number one, yourself, okay? But what I am going to say, in there are two cutter knives. They're called knives on a power machine, although saw blades are blades. The key to these machines is that set of knives has to be sharp, sharp, sharp. Okay, why do I say that? It's no different than using a hand plane. You're cutting wood. It's a little bit different process because you're scooping. It's almost like having a carving blade or a chisel and you're scooping. You're not planing straight through because you create these little, I don't know if you can see them, little ridges. I just sharpened this set. There's two ways that you know if your cutter knives are dull. Now, Peter, I'm not saying anything bad. I ran some wood through it and they were cutting fine. It's just that I started to hear something. The main indicator that I use to know if a planer is dull, the knives are dull, is sound. Excuse me. So yes, during production runs, I wear earplugs. If you have other types of ear muffs or whatever, protect your ears, all right? Because they do get noisy. Even the vacuum this is attached to does get noisy. The number one indicator is sound. They get louder. What you have is a cutting head, a round cutting head with a knife sticking out. And this is another reason why I don't like power tools. Even just a little tiny planing session, it throws dust in the air, and I have to go put a dust mask on and all this other stuff. When those knives come down and they hit the wood, if they're sharp, they're going to cut and move on. If they're dull, they're going to hammer that wood. So, the duller they are, the louder the planer. That's the indicator number one. Indicator number two is dust. More dust in the vacuum than normal. So when you check your shavings in between cleaning like I use a dust deputy attached to my vacuum. When I go to empty the dust deputy bin, if I see there's a lot more sawdust, fine dust in there, then I know we're getting dull. But I just honed these are sharp, we're good to go. So, I just mentioned wearing a dust mask. That is a personal preference. If you feel that there's too much dust in the air, then you need to wear one. If you're using a very large dust collector and you're sucking it all out, or normally I have the doors wide open and I blow the dust right outside with a fan. The other thing that I will always wear are safety glasses, okay? And because I need reading glasses, I use a bifocal one. Mainly because things do happen and chips can fly. So take care of yourself. You're in charge of number one, you, okay? So I do everything the same otherwise. I mark my ends, okay? I mark my ends that I plane in this direction, and I will make cross hatches when it's in the rough. These have already been planed, but I'm going to run them through one more time. So and when I flip it over, I do the same thing. I mark it, and off we go. So you need to have your grain direction of all your lumber lined up before you start your planing session. That way there's no question when you're planing. Now, as you can see, and I'm going to try to stack these all up here, they're not perfectly flat. See? They will rock a little bit. Like this one here. I think this one here might have a slight, yes it does. It has a slight bow and it might have a slight twist. This one's not too bad. That one's a little moved. So this process that I'm using will not 100% flatten lumber. All right, the concept is this. You pick, let's say this was my cupped side and this side was bowed out. I would run the cupped side in through until I get some light cuts on it. Then I flip it end for end. In the next pass, I'll be taking a little bit of the middle off. Then I flip it again. And I'm taking light cuts. We're talking anywhere from 32nd to 64th. You have to go by your machine. Sometimes it's like a quarter crank, an eighth crank, whatever. And when you keep flipping that back and forth until you're clean, okay, you will be flat enough for storage of lumber or flat enough to go to the workbench. So how loud are these things? They're loud. And I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to run a few boards through it. I'm not going to plane the whole stack because it's just rinse and repeat. But that's one of the reasons why hand tool woodworking can be just as efficient as power tool woodworking by the time you get set up. But I'm going to be putting hundreds of boards through this and flipping them multiple times just to get everything even. But once that's done, then it all goes right to the workbench and I use my hand tools. So, with no further ado, oh, there is one other thing about these little pigtailed apprentices. They tend to vibrate to a certain extent. So if you can clamp or bolt them down, that would help to something heavy. But if you just put them on sawhorses like I have them, it has a little bit of vibration. You'll see the sawdust will vibrate, the stack of wood will vibrate, and if you're not careful, you lose control of this stack up here. So I'm going to slide this stack off, reduce it to just a couple of boards. But let's have some fun. Let's make some noise. So here we go, vacuum first. And you see how noisy that is? That's the typical sound that these things make, and why I will, oh excuse me, I shouldn't be yelling. Machines are off. So that's all I really need to do to demonstrate what goes on here. But now I want to point out a couple of other processes, well, things that I do. So I've had this marked originally, that this is the leading edge. Okay, now this board is very nice. Smooth, clean, neat and tidy, ready to go to the bench. This board has a little bit of a problem up here, and I don't understand what's causing it. It could be there's like a little knotty section over here, or it could be the fact that it's twisted or bowed. But the one thing I did want to point out is right here. And it starts right about, let's see if I can mark it. Yep, there you go. Starts right there. This is called snipe. What happens is when the board comes out of the planer, the rear feed roller lets go, the front feed roller is pushing down, and the board tends to lift up a little bit into the cutter, and you get sniped. So when you're power woodworking, if that's all you ever do and you never hand plane, you lose your snipe on either end. Now if you're cutting mortises and tenons, and this is going to be a tenon, that's not really a big deal. Or if it is like this knotty section, I might cut that off. It's not a big deal. When you're hand planing, you don't have that. It's nice and flat and straight and true. So to eliminate that, and I'm pretty sure I did it this way, I ran this one through first. No, this one came out last. I ran this one through first, and I butted this one up against it so that this one does not have snipe. Well, there's a little tiny bit, has less snipe. So that's how you eliminate snipe in one way. There's a dozen other ways, but you can fine tune your machine. It's not my machine, so I'm not going to do it, but you can fine tune your machine to get rid of snipe. So there you go, power tool planing in the workshop at Dusty Splinters' place. Who'da thunk it, eh? I hope you found something useful, helpful, maybe entertaining. If you did, give it the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I welcome you to subscribe. And come on back for some more videos. Who knows what I'm going to get into next. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down there in the comment section. most importantly, as always, head out to your shop. Go make some shavings. Walter out.